nothing but peanut. I can do this. Yeah, buddy. All day long, baby. Everybody want to be a bodybuilder. I want to do these lunges, though.
Hey, what's up guys? I'm gonna go ahead and start off with the talents for row 15. The best two options are Sudden Death and Skull Splitter. I personally like to play Sudden Death because Execute is our hardest hitting ability and this talent procs quite often. Skull Splitter is totally fine though. It's basically like another charge because it gives you 20 rage on use. So playing this talent makes it easier to generate rage for Execute phase and it just helps you keep rage flowing. If you are low geared though and do not have much haste, I would recommend you to play Skull Splitter because it just makes arms much easier to play around for you. But it's all personal though, like just play with them, test them out, and see what you like to play. Alright, so for row 25, all of these talents are good to be honest, but the best option is going to be Stormbolt. It's very important to have a stunning keys because there's some ads that you can't kick. For example, on Theater of Pain, the fat boy that casts Devour Flesh, it's very important to stop that cast or else your tank will take a huge chunk of damage and that ad will heal a large portion of his health back. Also, stuns can be used as like a backup in case your group is out of kicks. It happens a lot in pugs, like most of the time you're not in Discord with them. You can't really call kicks out. Double Time is a fun talent to play around. I usually play this talent when I'm in lower keys and I just want to have fun and just blast damage. It's just nice to have because you'll never find yourself rage starved. But I rarely find myself rage starved anyway without it, so I usually just pick Stormbolt. Alright, so for row 30, Massacre is always going to be your pick. Like I said earlier, Execute is our strongest button to press, so you want Execute up as soon as possible. River of Battle is not a bad talent, but it's not really ideal either. Spamming Whirlwind will empty your rage quite fast, and Whirlwind doesn't really do a lot of damage anyway. But the most important reason we don't play this talent is because we can only execute at 20% HP. And in Mythic Plus, the ads die quite fast, so you won't get that much passive execute on them without Massacre. Rend is never really ever going to be your pick. It puts a dot onto your target and increases the crit damage to them by 10%. And it costs 30 rage to cast, so it's basically useless in M+. Alright, so for row 35, Defensive Stance will be your pick most of the time. It reduces damage from all sources by 20%. Try not to have this up too much though, because it does reduce your damage by 10%, so you only want to use this if you're at risk of death or if you know that a lot of damage is coming. Second Wind is not a bad talent though. It's extremely powerful on Plaguefall for the last boss because it can heal through the Infectious Rain. So it makes us immune to that damage and really helps out your healer. Bounding Stride is useless though. Like I only use it paired with Double Time on lower keys because they're both fun to play with. But if I ever do a key that I care about, always pick Distance. Alright, so for row 40, Warbreaker is always going to be your pick. The other talents do not compare. Warbreaker puts a 30% buff to all targets. It's our only source of uncapped AoE. Leave can possibly make a comeback, and I hope it does because we will always have 100% uptime on our mastery. And it's just more consistent cleave damage outside of our burst CDs, but until then, Warbreaker will always be your pick. For row 45, Avatar. The biggest reason we take Avatar is because of our legendary. Avatar and Bladestorm have a chance to proc one of the other two, and it procs Recklessness. Basically, if you cast Bladestorm, it can proc Avatar or Wreck, and if you use Avatar, it can proc Recklessness or Bladestorm. So talenting into Avatar gives us two chances to proc our Lego. For our last and final row, row 50, Dreadnought will be our pick. This talent gives Overpower 2 charges. It makes our Overpower shoot out a shockwave that deals damage to 5 targets behind your main target. Make sure when using this that you position yourself so that at least 5 targets are always in front of you. Keep in mind that with Sweeping Strikes, you can shoot out 2 shockwaves, hitting the same 5 targets twice. If you position yourself close enough to your main target, you can actually make both shockwaves hit that main target. Alright, so for the Souldbinds and Conduits, you will always play Forain in M+. The reason being is the combo of Wild Hunt Tactics and First Strike. This is where our burst comes into play with our cooldowns. Wild Hunt Tactics makes us deal 10% increased damage to targets above 75% health. First Strike gives us a 25% crit buff to every new target that we hit for 5 seconds. There are ways to make First Strike last a lot longer. For example, if your tank pulls a massive amount of adds, you can Ward Breaker most of them and leave at least one out. The reason we do this is because we are capped at the very most of 8 targets with Bladestorm. So you can Ward Breaker, and if your avatar procs Bladestorm, you can dip into that ad to refresh First Strike. This is so that you can sit Bladestorm a bit longer before canceling to use Aftershock. So for our potency conduit, it's best to play Crash the Ramparts. This conduit makes overpower deal an X amount of increased damage. However, this conduit also affects Dreadnought, making it a very strong pick for Cleave as well. The main reason we play this conduit and not the Aftershock conduit is because the Aftershock conduit reduces the cooldown of Aftershock by 15 seconds. Doing this makes it not line up with our cooldowns. Avatar is on a 1.5 minute cooldown, same with Bladestorm, and also the trinket I like to play, which is the Power Crystal. Alright, so for our endurance and finesse conduits, Safeguard and Stalwart Guardian are by far the best choices. Stalwart Guardian makes our Die by the Sword ability have a 1.5 minute cooldown. This is perfect for us because it lines up with our burst cooldowns. Warriors generate a lot of threat, so having our parry up every time we need it just makes it so that you won't risk dying to aggro or have to kite until your tank regains his threat. Safeguard and Stalwart Guardian are also a good combo because I like to intervene parry my tanks when they don't have much cooldowns. Doing this makes me and my tank immune to melee attacks, so every 1.5 minutes your tank has a major defensive cooldown. Don't get too much in the habit of doing this because if your tank uses a major cooldown himself, with you doing this, it really depletes the value of his cooldown, so make sure that you're very aware of what your tank has before doing this. The cool thing about Safeguard though is that it makes our intervene target take an X amount of reduced damage from all sources, so it just makes intervene parry even more effective. Alright, so for your gear, make sure you always take the highest item level on your items. Don't worry too much about secondary stats. Our main damage source comes from our strength, so on any piece of item that has strength attached to it, it's most likely going to be your best choice. This is not the case for everything though, so make sure you always sim yourself. But for example, a friend of mine, Byzantine, he stated that he simmed himself for about 5 or 10 times and it always came out to the same outcome, which is the highest item level. Once you get most of your items max eye level, then you can start fixing up your secondary stats for yourself. As far as your trinkets go, same goes, but there are some trinkets that are by far outperforming others. These are the Quantum Device, the Power Crystal, the Stone Legion Heraldry, and the PvP trinket. I personally like the Power Crystal because it's on a 1.5 minute CD and it lines up with my other cooldowns, and it gives a massive amount of crit. But I believe the Quantum Device may beat this trinket, but I hate playing with that trinket, so I don't use it. But for my second choice, if I was good at PvP, I would play the PvP trinket. It gives a large amount of haste and procs a massive amount of main stat. The uptime on this trinket is pretty big, but like I said before, just sim yourself and play with each of these if you have them, of course, and decide what's best for you. All right, so now it's time for the fun part, the rotations. Going into a pack, you want to charge, of course, then pop Warbreaker and press Avatar literally at the same time you press Warbreaker. The reason why is because Avatar is not on the global cooldown. If Avatar procs Recklessness, you will Aftershock immediately, then Bladestorm after with Ignore Pain. The reason we use Ignore Pain is to mitigate any damage coming. Most of all, it's to spend rage so that you're not wasting as much rage as you would without using it. However, if your avatar procs Bladestorm, you will sit that Bladestorm for a bit and wait for the last second of First Strike to cancel Bladestorm and then use it Aftershock. After that Aftershock, you will Bladestorm right after. However, if you proc a Recklessness from your avatar, you will Aftershock right after, and then into a Blade Storm. Alright, so after using your burst cooldowns, usually the pack is close to execute phase. You would then use sweeping strikes and start leaving your executes and dreadnoughts onto the pack. One thing I forgot to mention about Aftershock is it's a lot like dreadnought. You want to try to aim so that it hits at the max of 5 targets. If the pack is not in execute phase by then, I'd still pop sweeping strikes and cleave as much dreadnoughts onto the pack as possible. You want to get as much dreadnoughts as you can outside of cooldowns. The reason it's okay to use sweeping right away is because usually by the time it ends, the ads are about dead. You'll get use of your sweeping with execute on a pack. Alright, so for single target, you should pop all your cooldowns immediately. Keep Mortal Strike on cooldown always, unless you are in execute phase. Use Slam to proc your overpowers. Make sure you do not waste a proc overpower. Try to keep at least 1 stack and use it once it hits 2 stacks. Using overpower this way helps you not deplete all of your rage, plus overpower costs no rage, and it's basically free damage. If your avatar procs Recklessness, try to spend as much rage as you can, because your rage gained from all sources is increased by 100%, so you'll have a hard time not wasting rage, so it's time to spend. If you don't have Recklessness up, just keep MS on cooldown, manage your overpower stacks, keep a good watch of your rage bar, and do not deplete your rage under 30 while MS is coming off cooldown. Execute phase is the most important part of any warrior spec, especially arms. It's our time to shine. It's very important that that phase is played perfectly by you. You don't want to misplay your rage before and during execute phase. It's most important that you minimize any downtime during this phase. Alright, so for execute phase, watch your target's health and make sure you know your rage amount before you're going into execute phase. If you're on the lower end, it's important that you walk out to get a charge in so your rage is ready. Also, don't worry about getting an auto attack or 2 right before execute phase in case you don't have your charge. Also keep in mind that avatar also gains you 20 rage, so that's also a key tip. You can also use your Blade Storm as a way to generate rage while keeping uptime on the boss. If your Blade Storm or avatar procs Recklessness, cancel that Blade Storm immediately and spam execute until Recklessness is finished. If you don't have Recklessness during execute phase, you would just replace Slam for execute, meaning use execute, keep overpower at 1 stack, and use overpower once you have 2 stacks, then keep executing. Just like I said before, doing this helps you keep rage going, though you don't have to run into a lot of downtime. Lastly, Mortal Strike is to only be used as a way to keep deep wounds on your target. Only use it once you see deep wounds hits around 3 to 4 seconds, then get back to using your execute and overpowers. Alright, I just want to give a quick shout out to some of my favorite warriors to watch. I hope you guys check them out as well. One of them is Crit Cake. He is an arms warrior main. He streams at twitch.tv/critcake. He is currently the rank 1 arms warrior in the world right now, so he can definitely teach you guys a few things. For sure, check him out. The next I have to give a shout out to is Danwar. His Twitch profile is twitch.tv/Dan_war. He is one of the best warriors on the platform that stream. He currently raids with Method. He pushes M+ a lot as well, but I think he swapped to playing Monk though for a while. But he is still for sure definitely one of the best out there. I have to also give a shout out to Pika for all you prot warriors out there. Pika is currently among the top 5 prot warriors in the world. I myself have been getting into prot as well, and Pika for sure is helping me out with that. You can go ahead and watch him at twitch.tv/Pika TV. That's Pika with an L, not an I. Last but not least, my favorite is Rising Time. I met Biz about 2 years ago. Long story short, I mained warrior when I started out, but I was horrible at raiding and I got flamed by this ret paladin. To be honest, it kind of pissed me off because he has bubble and bop, so he doesn't have to do mechanics, and that's where I got the idea to play ret paladin. I met Biz, I saw him kick ass at warrior, so I thought if this guy can do it, then I can too. But Biz has a few really in-depth guides on his YouTube channel. I really recommend you guys to check him out. I'm pretty sure he will come out with a arms guide in 9.1. That will be probably far more in-depth. Please check him out. Anyway, I hope you guys liked the video. Thanks for watching, and see you later.